Awesome. Okay. Hi, guys. Cool. I'm excited about this. Like I said, I pulled a bunch of questions off of the a thread on the forum, and so I'm gonna go through those and see how long that takes. Some of these are really good questions, and some of them are really hard questions. And So I tried to think a little bit ahead of time, like what the answers would be, but I have no idea how well that went. So anyway, thanks for sticking around and being interested and asking such interesting questions. First one, what do you do? What does an average day or week look like? So my job title is research associate at the Game Innovation Lab, so at a research laboratory at the University of Southern California in the School for Cinematic Arts. As a researcher, I'm basically doing experimental games. That's kind of the idea behind the research lab. Our research is very practical, so it's a lot about making things. But it's making things that are designed to answer specific questions. It's a lot of like, we want an educational game that does this, that teaches this, or that conveys this. Is that possible? Is that something that we can do? And then that's essentially a design challenge for us, and we'll, take a year and try to answer it by actually building a game. So I'm a research associate. I'm full-time staff in the lab. I work there, a regular work week. I have an office. What I actually do day to day depends a lot on the time of year and specifically what projects are actually going on. Some of the time that involves grant writing. My position is funded with soft money, which means that in order for me to stay employed in the position that I have, we need to be bringing money into the lab. My position is funded by the projects that I work on. It's not like a guaranteed staff position or anything like that that's built into the budget of the lab. Oh God, I just did my Windows 8. Windows 8'd all over here. That's no good. So I have to write grants or write proposals to companies or private organizations that might give us money to make games. Sometimes we make games for other schools or departments in USC. Sometimes we make games for companies. We've made a couple of games for Microsoft and other companies like that. And then sometimes we're making games for government grant that are associated with government grants or that kind of thing for the Department of Education or National Science Foundation or National Endowments of the Humanities is one that we're waiting to. No, we're about to submit. National Endowment of Humanities. We're waiting to hear back from National Science Foundation, have our fingers crossed on that, and then we're talking to a bunch of companies about potential partnerships and sponsorships and that kind of thing. So sometimes I'm writing grants, sometimes I'm working directly on a project, in which case I do a lot of design work, and that's brainstorming. That's a lot of like writing documentation and spreadsheets. It's a lot of generating content. It's a lot of overseeing play tests. So organizing people to come into the lab and test games, and taking notes, synthesizing those experiences, creating presentations for clients. So that we can present how our work is progressing, what we've done, what we're planning to do, in order to get sign-offs on things, to make sure that everybody's expectations are met, creating presentations. Historically, I haven't done a lot of publishing papers in journals, although that is something that I should do more of. But I do more presenting work at conferences. So putting together proposals for Games for Change, which is going on this week in New York, and I'm not there because I didn't get anything into it, or Game Developers Conference, or Games Learning in Society, or Serious Games, or any of a number of games conferences, putting together presentations and proposals, applying to be a speaker or to run a workshop at one of those places. And then more recently, I've moved into, we've gotten a lot more projects in the lab, and so I am in more of a project manager role. So also, I guess, programming, so game design and also engineering, and I've done a lot more of that in projects in the past. Now there's sort of so many projects that I'm more of a project manager or producer, and put together teams. So there's more interviewing potential students to work on projects, assigning them roles, assigning them tasks, and making sure that those teams are working together, that they understand what they're doing, that they feel ownership over a project, that the project is on track and on schedule and getting done, that sort of everything is going the way that it's supposed to, the game is hopefully effective, or that we at least have a process in place to try to test its effectiveness, its efficacy. And then coordinating with lots of different partners in our own department, interactive media, or in our school, the School of Cinematic Arts, or across divisions on campus, or with other organizations that we partner with outside of USC. So a lot of email and communication and meetings with various people, either chasing leads or giving status updates or working through problems with people that we need to sort of help us out. I don't know, none of that sounds like concrete things that I do. But I don't have a really set schedule that I go into the office at a particular time and do a thing for a set number of hours. My schedule is very built around meetings. Either we have weekly or semi-weekly or bi-weekly project staff meeting, staff status update meetings. We have meetings with each of the projects to sort of check in on their progress and make sure things are going, and work out what needs to be done. And then we have lots of other meetings that are just scheduled throughout the week with these other partners that we need to communicate with. And so then in between that time, I do whatever work I can, whatever needs to be done, mostly on managing projects, organizing the sort of infrastructure of the projects, the play testing, the procurement of hardware and software and all of that kind of stuff, but then also sometimes working on the projects themselves. And then, of course, I'm also, in addition to that full-time work, I'm overloaded as an instructor for one section of the practical segment of the Introduction to Game Design course for undergrads at USC. And so that's once a week. It's 2 hours of class that I teach once a week. But I do, I have to put together slides and grade assignments and things for that. So there's additional stuff that I do either at the office or bring home over the weekends and that kind of thing to work on that kind of stuff. And then in addition to that, I'm associated with a couple different companies. One of them is called Crater House. That's the company that Bill Grainer runs. So I do some work with them and I do some work for them occasionally. I'm also associated with a company called Futurebound that makes educational games about getting into college. And yeah, I think that. Oh, and then I'm also the one of the festival co-chairs for the Indiecade festival. So that's a major conference and expo for independent games that happens in Los Angeles annually, and I do a lot of coordination for them. That's actually not really a job. That's just a thing that I do. I do a lot of other stuff too. So if we want to get into that, so it's a lot. It's kind of a hodgepodge. I do lots of stuff sort of whenever I have time. I guess is the answer to that question. Spreadsheets, though. Maybe that's what you were looking for. I do a lot of spreadsheets. What does my educational background look like? And what is the educational background of my coworkers? So my background is in computer science in undergrad. But I actually went to a liberal arts school in California called Pomona College, which is like 3.5 blocks from Harvey Mudd, which is where Sean Plott went, but we did not know each other at the time. I think we went at different times. Pomona College is a liberal arts school. It's not like a math and engineering school. It doesn't have that focus. Most of the classes that I took in computer science, I took up at Harvey Mudd, because that does have more of an engineering focus. But even there, well, actually, I don't know what degrees they give. Pomona gave me a Bachelor of Arts in computer science. So I have a BA. I worked for 3 or 4 years as a programmer in a research lab in Marina del Rey called the Institute for Creative Technologies. ICT is it's just a really interesting place that does all kinds of like cutting edge intersection of technology and Hollywood. That's, I think, what they sell. So they do narrative-driven technologies like VR and full screen, character-driven, like instructional things. I did a bunch of virtual worlds stuff, some stereoscopic VR stuff, like head-mounted display stuff. I did some research projects about emotion and memory and sense. So like just a bunch of different sort of research projects. I worked as a programmer there until I discovered the program at USC, the master's program in game design, interactive media, and met some of the people who were in that program and realized that I loved everything about it. And so then I went there. And so I have my MFA in interactive media from USC. And I just stuck around USC after I graduated. I got this job working in the lab. I worked in the lab while I was a graduate student and just continued working there afterwards. Question about ways of entering the industry that might be overlooked by people who are interested in careers designing games. So I don't, to some extent, I don't have a great answer for this. It depends, first of all, it depends a lot on what you want to do. And you may have the ambition to design games, and that's great, but that's like a huge spread of actual careers and jobs and roles. There's a huge difference between designing games as part of some kind of a small independent organization, or not even independent, but some sort of a small organization, versus designing games that you have probably all heard of, that are like on consoles, that are AAA games, big company games. Designing games as part of a studio like, I don't know, Irrational or BioWare or Blizzard or like any of those big names. That's a very, very different thing than working for a small studio and producing small games. I know a lot more about the latter, about small studios, than I do about what you might call industry or what you might call AAA. So I can't speak really well to that. If that's your ambition to like be a game designer at Blizzard, I don't really know how you get that job. Sorry. But I think probably a lot of it is the same, and it's not necessarily overlooked. But I think the main answer is make a game. Like, do it. Make your game. If you want to be a game designer, you should be making games. You should have a portfolio of games that you can show somebody and say, this is my work. I'm a game designer, hire me. Start with board games. If you've never made a game before, don't jump into making a digital game first. Start modding and creating your own board games and card games. That's the stepping stone. Like, that's a really important first step. It's a much more scalable project. It's a much more doable project. It's got many fewer question marks. It's got many fewer dead ends. Even if you're a programmer, that's great. If you're a programmer, that's fantastic. That is really valuable skills for working in the industry. But if you haven't made a game before, start making board games. And then once you have gotten comfortable doing that, move on to digital games. Go to jams, find game jams in your area, or participate in internet game jams like Ludum Dare or the Global Game Jam, or any of, there are probably dozens of other ones. Those are the big ones, I think. There's never been a better time to make games. There's so many digital tools available for making games. Unity is a great one. That's what I use. That's what we use in the lab almost exclusively. Unreal has recently released a free version of their tool. Don't overlook things like Game Maker and Twine, especially if you haven't made a game before. Starting out, Twine is a fantastic place to begin. I would really highly encourage you to start there. Game Maker, I don't have a lot of direct experience with, but it's simpler than Unity. And again, even if you have coding expertise, the issue here isn't like how good you are as a coder. The issue here is the number of different systems that you need to pull together to actually create a complete game. And you could be really good at programming. You could like be able to do each of those individual things. But the creation of an entire game is such a complicated endeavor that it's very easy, especially for engineers, to get kind of wrapped up in the details of particular problems that are interesting from an engineering standpoint, and then never finish the game. The only important thing about this exercise is that you finish the game. That's the only thing that matters. It doesn't honestly matter how good the game is. Your first game, especially if it's your first game's not going to be good. That's okay. Don't expect it to be good. Expect it to be a thing. Like, expect to play it. Feel pride at the fact that you can play the game. That's all that matters. Your second game will be better. So get that first game out of the way. Don't spend a lot of time trying to perfect it. Don't spend a lot of time engineering systems or tools to make it work. Just finish it. That's all that matters. You're trying to put together a portfolio. You're not going to get a job on one game, honestly. So don't like put all of your eggs in that basket. Also scope appropriately. Like, the game that you make first, if you want to actually make it, it's going to be smaller than what you're imagining. So be willing to cut stuff out. Don't think of it as like betraying your idea or something like that. These like ideas don't die. If you're a creator, if you're a game designer, nothing that you do ever dies. It just reinvents itself every project you do. So if something doesn't make it into this game, that's okay. It'll make it into some other game. In some other form, in some other way. Like, it's all right. That's okay. Just get the game done. So that said, like, if you want to make games, you should make games. That I can tell you that 100%. If you want to go into AAA industry, if you want to work at Blizzard or a company like that, I don't really know what their career paths look like. I know sometimes they hire designers, and that's probably what you want to do. They also hire QA, and the bar for getting a job at QA is much lower. QA is not an awesome job. Like, it's really, really hard work. Sometimes if you're really good at QA, you can get promoted up to design, but it doesn't happen often, and it doesn't happen fast. So that is a potential career path, but it's difficult. It's not easy. I would say look at some other things. Look at game research and usability. That's a enormously growing field right now. It's not directly related to game design, but if you can get into a company, this is sort of the QA approach as well. If you can get into a company, then you're more likely to be able to transfer into design than you are going to be to get hired as a designer. So game research and usability, if you have any interest in math and statistics, if you have any interest in data, like data analysis, that's a huge growth sector for games right now. I would encourage people to think about writing for games, not because it's a great way to get a job, but because the industry needs better writers and more writers. There's not a huge demand for them, unfortunately, but there should be. And so I want more better writers in the industry. That's just selfish of me. Project management is a place that you can get your way into games if you're very organized, if you're good at sort of making lists and making schedules and keeping deadlines and communicating with people, empathizing with people, understanding what people need and helping them get that. Project management is a great way to get into game design. Also business development, PR and community development. These are things that I think big companies, AAA companies, have lots of expertise in, but I know a lot of indie developers and small studios that struggle a lot more with things like business development and PR and community management. So again, not all of them realize that that's something that they need, and not all of them feel like they can afford that person, but a lot of them really do need that person. And so if you can put together a good portfolio for yourself and convince a company that they need you, that can be a way of breaking into the industry. I hope any of that was good advice. God, I really hope so. Somebody asked me what my favorite hobby unrelated to gaming is. So probably, it depends on what unrelated to gaming means. Probably the best answer to this is hiking. I really like hiking. I love hiking in the Santa Monica Mountains. It's where I do a lot of this is where I do a lot of hiking. I like the physical effort of it, and I also like sort of being up high and the kind of views that you get. I like cooking, although I have not done any cooking for the last several years, and I kind of miss it, but I'm out of the habit of doing that. I like traveling. I don't love traveling. I often don't go out of my way to travel, but when I have opportunities to travel, I like taking them. I like traveling with people, so that's fun. Hiking, the thing about hiking is that for me, it's not unrelated to gaming. Hiking is one of the places that I do my best game design work, especially brainstorming and doing sort of basic development of projects. For me, hiking is an escape, but it's also a really, really good, it's good work. It's a good work environment for me. Other stuff that I love doing, I love reading. I've really gotten into audiobooks recently and listening to them while I go for walks or go for hikes. I like watching TV quite a bit. I like media. I like popular media. I like talking about media and culture. So I like discussing TV shows. I like reading books and talking about them with people. I'm in a book club. I like that kind of stuff. But that's definitely related to gaming. Like all of that, the media that I take in and the conversation that I have about it is very, very close to, thinking about concepts for new games, thinking about story ideas for games, thinking about how to develop games that I'm working on in different directions. Like it's hard for me to describe that as unrelated to my game design work. I mean, I guess it's unrelated to like playing games, but okay. So getting into really hard questions that I can answer more quickly, I think, because I cheated. I made some lists ahead of time. Formative games in terms of my love of gaming. I'm mostly just going to list these out. So definitely Link to the Past. Link to the Past was a game that I played a bunch of times when I was young because I did not have a Super Nintendo. But if I got good grades every quarter, then I was allowed to rent a Super Nintendo for the weekend, and I would rent Link to the Past, and I would get the Master Sword. If you guys know the game, I would beat the first 3 temples, get the Master Sword, and then maybe beat one or two of the next 7 temples and get like 1 or 2 crystals, and then that would be the end of the weekend. And then I would work really hard for the next quarter, and I'd get good grades, and I'd get to rent another Super Nintendo. But because it was a rental, I had to start the game over, and I would play the exact same part of the game over that next weekend. It was pretty great. Ice hockey for the Nintendo Entertainment System was just an awesome, fun little game that I would play with my sister. I don't know what to say about that. It was just it was so goofy, and the characters were so funny looking, and it was so mechanics driven, and the fact that we could play it together, even competitively, like it felt like we were playing together, and so that was fun. Quest for Glory was one of my absolute favorite games growing up. I've talked about it before on Mostly Walking. I love the way that it bridges adventure games and RPGs. I think it's got really, really clever systems, and some of the later games have smart writing in them as well, although some of the writing is not that smart. Betrayal at Krondor I've also talked about. It's just a very deep RPG, but it's I don't know, it's a more Western RPG, I guess. I didn't play Eastern RPGs when I was younger. I missed out on a lot of JRPGs and that kind of stuff. Betrayal at Krondor was sort of my jam, though. I played so many hours of that late at night when in middle school. Mario 64 is just joy. I mean, like, that's such a joyful game. I don't know what to say about it. GoldenEye, I played a lot in college with friends. We would, over lunch between classes, we would play a lot of GoldenEye. Same thing with Halo 1 and 2. Played a lot of multiplayer Halo in college. Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem is just a fantastic game that the core mechanics of the game aren't fantastic, but they're pretty good, and the game is scary as hell, and it does things with breaking the fourth wall that are just delightful. No One Lives Forever. I don't know if anybody has played this. This is currently like impossible to get because it's in copyright limbo, but No One Lives Forever was a Sierra game, a first-person shooter, stealth action shooter that is so good. It's just got so much personality, and I miss it so much. Formative game. Then the other part of this question was formative games in terms of actually working in the gaming industry. So definitely at the top of that list is Knights of the Old Republic. That was a game that, like, I had one like foundational experience with that game that changed the way that I thought about interactive media and made me like really respect the power of games as being able to, you know, touch people emotionally. That was huge for me. I went through a period where I wasn't designing games, but I was doing more game criticism, just blogging about games. You Have to Burn the Rope was something that I played at that time, and it was definitely sort of formative for me. I love that game because it's so stupid simple, and it is meant, I think, to be a criticism of games that are too easy and hold your hand too much. But I did not find it that way. I actually just enjoyed the hell out of it, and I played it probably 30 times because the song at the end is just wonderful, and I enjoyed playing through the game. I legitimately enjoyed the experience of playing through the game, even though it lasts 3 minutes and there's no challenge to it, and then being rewarded by that song. And so for me, thinking about why the hell do I love You Have to Burn the Rope? It's such a stupid game. Like, what is it about this that makes me love it? Something that I thought a lot about in terms, like, when I was thinking about making games and wanting to be a game designer. Beyond Good and Evil. If you haven't played that game, I don't know how well it holds up. I've got it on Steam, and I tried playing it, and there was one part where I had to like race something, and it was stupid, and I stopped playing. But that's such a good game, and at the time, it was like wonderful, wonderful. Jade is such a fantastic character, one of the best female protagonists that I know in games. And the story for that game has so much heart. It's got like a really great, just solid progression. I played that game while I was a senior in college, and so this was more formative, I guess, than probably any game that I played. But when I was a senior in college, I took a class called Women in Computer Games that was a cross disciplinary, cross school, I don't know. It was between interdepartmental, I don't know. It was an interdepartmental class between computer science and women's studies. And it was basically just a class about how women are represented in games, women as an audience for games, the culture of games as it relates to women. Really, really cool, interesting stuff. Lots of like really good, thought-provoking social science and games criticism. And at the time that I was taking this class, I played Beyond Good and Evil, and it was so cool to see a game that had such a good, solid story that anybody could enjoy, that was about this really like well fleshed out, strong woman, female character, and that the story was not about like, it wasn't an invasion story. It was sort of like a protection story. She's trying to protect her family, but it feels good. The game is just solid all the way through, and you're exploring this cool world. It's kind of like Grim Fandango in the way that it creates this like very cool alternate world that's like nothing you've seen before. It's got like just really solid themes. Anyway, it's an excellent game. I played it at a really cool moment in my life. I like that a lot. Portal, I mean, obviously I talk about it all the time. Braid does a lot of things really well and also does a lot of things poorly, I think. And that's one of the games, I don't know if it's one of the first games or just one of the most standout games to me that was sort of like, this is a game that I can understand how it was made. I understand the size of the studio that made it. I understand the scope of the game. I understand some of the really cool things that it does, and I think that there are some fundamental design decisions that could have been made differently that would have made it better. And I would love to it got me thinking about how would I design this game? How would I change this game to be something different? I also put down Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead is just, it's so good. It is such good experience design all the way through. The levels are designed so well. The cinematic is so good. The characters are good. Their barks are really good. They have personality. The design is so focused around the idea of four-person cooperation, and every part of the game points at that. Like, it has no it's got no fray. It's just like so focused on its design goals. Yeah, so it's it's a super good game. And then, of course, there are a bunch of games that I draw on as inspiration for when I'm making games, like Minecraft or The Walking Dead or Cute Night or Persona 4. These are just games that I always come back to when I'm designing stuff. So those are, I don't know, games that I love to one degree or another. Most frustrating thing in video games or design choices that just turn me off. I thought about this for a little while. I think the biggest one is lack of contextualization. I get really, really frustrated when I don't know why I'm doing the thing that I'm doing. I don't know who I'm supposed to be or what my relationship is to the world. This is honestly why I think I don't like or can't play some games that are really, really good, that are just really good games that I cannot bring myself to play, like Eco or Shadow of the Colossus. Really good games. I totally respect them. A lot of people love them to death. I get that. I just can't play them. I start playing those games and I feel like I'm lost in a world. Like, I don't understand who I'm supposed to be or what I'm supposed to be doing. There's just, it's too vague. It's too ambiguous. It's too a fairy tale maybe, but not in a way that I can like relate to or understand. Yeah. Fallout 3. Fallout 3 is, I think, in a lot of ways a really well-designed game, and I love I love Skyrim, for example, which is essentially the same game. But Fallout 3 has this problem for me where it drops you in a world that is just so hostile towards you that it doesn't seem worth it to ever leave home. And so basically my experience was that I got kicked out of the vault. I wandered across the countryside until I found Megaton, and then I never wanted to leave Megaton again. And so then I stopped playing because it just didn't seem worth leaving the walls. The context of that game, it wasn't strong enough. My mission wasn't strong enough, given the world that was just sort of so big and violent. The other thing that I don't like in games is when they're too demanding of me. I like games to be, and that's weird because I like games that challenge me in some ways. Mostly I like games that challenge me intellectually or emotionally. But games that are too hard, or games that demand too much time, games that like don't show me that my effort is getting me somewhere, that frustrates me. That like really bothers me sometimes, and sometimes I just can't continue a game that I don't feel like I'm making the kind of progress that I want to be making. That it just doesn't show me that. And I think that comes out in some of the games that I've played, especially in like Half-Life, when I feel like that game is demanding too much, especially when it's demanding too much in a way that's like not fun or not the point of the game. I find that really frustrating. And then the sort of converse of that question was, what design elements make me happiest? And are there any awful games that I can't stop playing because I love a mechanic or interaction so much? That's such a wonderfully terrible question. It's basically the question about guilty pleasures. Do I have guilty games? So in terms of design elements that make me happiest, I love social mechanics in games. I love all of BioWare's games, Dragon Age and Mass Effect, and obviously Knights of the Old Republic. Persona 4, I mentioned. I love all of the social features in that game. I love the like getting to know other characters and spending time with them in order to level up your relationship and learn more about them and solve problems for them. And Persona 4 is actually a great example of a game that like half of that game is story and social simulation, and half of it is dungeon crawl adventure. And I hated the dungeon crawl adventure. Like it was such it dragged so badly for me. I wanted to get through it, to get back to going to school and hanging out with friends after school and doing all of that stuff. But I kept playing it. I mean, I played through the whole game and slogged through all of the dungeon crawling so that I could get to more of the social simulation. I'm a big fan of role-playing mechanics sort of all over the place, and I like role-playing games, especially when they're really about role-playing rather than just like fantasy trappings. Role-playing for me has a lot to do with making character-based decisions that aren't necessarily mechanically optimal. So games that provide me opportunities to do that and don't punish me for making suboptimal choices because they're character-based, or especially games that will recognize when I'm making character-based decisions that are not optimal and reward me in a narrative way for making character-based decisions. I love that. I love that so much. I'm a big fan of heavily themed turn-based strategy games. So games like XCOM. XCOM is kind of crack for me. I'm a big fan. I haven't played a lot of it yet because I'm waiting for the actual final release, which may be recently released, of Massive Chalice. Like Massive Chalice is a kind of game that I can really get behind, and I can get behind that and because of the turn-based strategy that's like themed, it's character-based, and also because it's got this like meta game that's all about these tight, sort of straightforward economy loops, which is another thing that I'm really into. That sort of Euro game, like buy resource engines that will produce more resources that let you buy more engines that let you produce more resources. I love that a lot, to the point where I'll play some games that aren't worth a lot, that are pretty awful games, just because they have a really satisfying feedback loop. Idle games like Cookie Clicker or Adventure what's that? Yeah, Adventure, I think is what it's called. Or Civ Clicker. I don't know. There's a whole slew of idle games that aren't very good, as opposed to, I would say, A Darkened Room is very good. I like that game. But there are idle games that are just they're just idle games. They just are that they're just Skinner boxes. And I play too much of those sometimes. Also Assassin's Creed 2. So Assassin's Creed 2 is good in a lot of ways, but it like between the 3 games, it goes on for a long time, probably longer than I'm really into, except it's got all of the like, I can take over an area of the map and buy up businesses, and then those businesses will make me money, and then I can like hire on new assassins and send them off on jobs, and they'll level up assassin points and all of that. I enjoyed that kind of stuff, that like metagamey stuff. And so I played all through Assassin's Creed, the Assassin's Creed 2 trilogy, mostly because it had so much of that stuff that I enjoyed, and so I went through the story despite the story sometimes. Okay, I'm gonna skip ahead to like easier questions. Oh god, no, none of these are easy questions. Board games that have the most interesting mechanics. I'm gonna say Battlestar Galactica or Game of Thrones. The like really highly themed Fantasy Flight games, I think, have really fascinating mechanics. So the like Game of Thrones board game has a kind of like press your luck cooperative component where everybody needs to fund the wall in the north to prevent the wildlings from attacking, and obviously nobody wants to fund it, but if it doesn't get funded enough, then everybody gets attacked by wildlings. I think that's really cool. Battlestar Galactica has such a great hodgepodge of ridiculous mechanics that all come together to beautifully simulate that TV show. That's a fantastic, like really interesting game, like super complicated, way too complicated for a board game, but really, really interesting and fun. Favorite board games, it's too hard. One Night Ultimate Werewolf I've been playing a lot of. Love Letter I really like. Both of those games are super short, which is a thing that I like. Also then on the other side, Village, which is not super short but is wonderful, and is a worker placement game about sort of like generations of people and their legacy. Seven Wonders, I just played Seven Wonders tonight. That's a great game. I just really enjoy that game. And then tabletop role-playing games. So I don't know if this counts as board games, but Grey Ranks, Dogs in the Vineyard, Night Witches, Maybe those are the main ones. I also like Dungeon World and the Apocalypse World games quite a bit. But Dogs in the Vineyard is one of my favorites. And Grey Ranks and Night Witches are both like sort of wonderfully terrible games. Like horrifying games. Grey Ranks is so sad. Beautifully sad. Great games if you have people that you can roleplay with. Yeah, I'm gonna skip like a bunch of these really interesting questions. I'm gonna go down to the bottom. Thoughts, hopes, fears about where the games industry is headed in the next decade, which is a huge question, right? So I'm like just gonna scratch the surface. For some reason I was focused on fears when I was thinking about this. So one of my fears is we're currently in this kind of race for the bottom cycle when it comes to marketing and selling games. And what I mean by that is the price that people are willing to pay for a game as an object, as an artifact, as a thing that you can play. The perceived value of a game is decreasing rapidly. It's sort of in free fall. And this is a combination of things like free-to-play games, which obviously devalue the idea of a game because the game presents itself as free. Like, you don't need to pay anything for this game, which is not always true, but has an effect on our perception of the value of a game. Things like Steam sales and bundles, which are great a lot of the time, and they can be great for developers, but they also tend to devalue the perception of the worth of a game because people get used to buying games for incredibly low prices, and then they sort of expect games to have those incredibly low prices or only purchase them when they're at those incredibly low prices. And then where it really bothers me is on like the App Store, where you can create a like really beautiful, really thoughtfully designed, just like a solid experience of a game that to me expresses a lot of value, that I like gives me a lot of value as a game. I'm thinking about something like Monument Valley or I don't know. I mean, like any of the Telltale games that are on iOS devices, or Threes is a good example of a game that has an enormous amount of value. But putting it on a platform, like a mobile platform, makes people like the expectation of price is sort of ridiculous. Like there's, a lot of games that are on mobile platforms, and maybe Threes is a good example of a game on iOS that is priced appropriately. But there's a lot of there are a lot of games that are right for $1 or $1.99. And then there are a lot of games that are worth a lot more than that. But it's almost impossible to price them higher than that because so few people are willing to buy them. So I'm worried about this idea that it's encouraging more and more developers to develop free-to-play games because it's extremely difficult to market and sell and make money off of a game that's not free-to-play, because nobody buys it at full price, and you don't make money off of it when it's not full price. So it's sort of forcing people to do different things that I think aren't necessarily healthy for games as an art form. So I'm worried about that. Crowded stores like Steam, there's a part of me that loves the fact that Steam is opening up its doors and it's not curating nearly as much. The App Store, there's something wonderful about the fact that the App Store sort of lets anybody in, but at the same time, those marketplaces have become so crowded that it's very difficult for somebody to actually, like, now breaking in is not about getting on Steam, it's about getting noticed on Steam, and that's in a lot of ways a harder proposition. I worry about how indies are going to be able to manage that without resorting to huge advertising budgets. And in order to have a huge advertising budget, you need to make a lot of compromises in the kind of game that you're making. So I worry about that. Oh God, I'm super worried about online-only content. So to fight piracy, a lot of big games are, like AAA games, are moving to systems where you have to be online in order to play the game. Not just because like there's an online check-in or whatever, but because the experience of the game is only online. So a game like Destiny, which is essentially an MMO that isn't really played massively, like it's not played as a massively multiplayer game, but you can, or what's the other one, Titanfall, is that what that was, that there's no single player experience to it. It's only multiplayer, and the theoretical single player experience is just another multiplayer mode. So there's no way for you to play the game not online, which is fine. I get that, and I get that as an anti-piracy measure, but I don't like playing multiplayer games for the most part. I like playing single player games, and I am going to be sad at the loss of single player game experiences that sort of I'm going to have experiences that I would love to have that won't exist because the market just won't allow big companies to make single player games anymore. Blockbuster games are just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't know if that's sustainable. I don't know how it possibly is sustainable. But on the other hand, maybe it opens up more niches for smaller games that take risks to do interesting things. And we're seeing that, a bunch of the games that I've played on Play-by-Play, Pup.io, Stanley Parable, Hotline Miami, are sort of like games that were made by small, either individuals or small teams that did risky things that like you would never see in a AAA game, that in a blockbuster game. And maybe those games only exist because the blockbuster games have gotten so huge that there's room now for AAA games or AA games or whatever you want to call them. These sort of less than AAA but really good, solid, polished experience games. Okay, so that's all really depressing. My hope for the future for the next decade is that, like I said earlier, it's never been easier to make games. There are more tools available than ever before. I hope to God that the next decade sees more and more voices entering the space of developing games. I want to see more variety, more diversity in the kinds of games that get made, in indie games, in like in these like AAA games. I want to see more games that are the scope of something like Antichamber, for example, that just do weird things that subvert the norms that we have from big, safe AAA games that experiment, that tell different stories, that have different mechanics, that do like just crazy stuff. I'm excited about that. And then I'm also excited about the prospect that as games become more and more mainstream, more and more a part of our culture, it's more and more a common thing that we can talk about, that we can have more conversations about games as culture. I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited about opening that conversation up wider, so that, like, everybody who's here is here because they like talking about games, or at least like listening to me talk about games, but are interested in games as culture. And I think that that's going to become more and more common, and there are going to be more and more, things that are sort of the equivalent of book clubs for games. There's going to be more water cooler conversation that's not about TV shows, but it's about games. There's going to be more mainstream media that covers games and what games are about and what they say and what they mean to us. I'm really excited about that. I think that all of those conversations, those are all conversations that I really want to have. So, okay, cool. That's awesome. I don't know how long that was. That seemed like I talked for a really long time. Thanks, guys, for hanging out and listening to me ramble on about all sorts of crazy stuff. There are some more questions on here that I can try to answer maybe later. But if you have other questions for me, or want to have discussions about this kind of stuff with other members of the community, check out the forum, undefinedbehavior.com/forum. There's lots of cool stuff there, lots of like really good conversations going on. You can leave messages on this kind of stuff, like questions that you would like me to answer in future Q&As, and that kind of thing. Yeah, I think that would be fun. Yeah, so plan is that I will do something on Saturday. I haven't figured out what yet, but I will try to figure that out ASAP. That'll go up on the forum, and on Twitter I'll announce that. And then next week I'm going to play Apartment, and then probably some other game as well, but I don't know exactly what. So yeah, we'll see. Something fun and short, probably. Cool. Thanks, everybody, and thanks for the great questions. I hope some of this was kind of interesting. Yeah, I'll see you next time. Have a great night.